Hi, everybody. I am Mark Graban. I'm the VP of Improvement and Innovation Services for KaiNexus. I want to welcome you to episode 13 of our Ask Us Anything series. I'm joined today by our co-founder and CEO, Dr. Greg Jacobson. Hey, Greg.
Hey, good afternoon, Mark.
So we've got a bunch of questions today, and we'll thank everybody for sending those in. We're going to start off, jump right in. A question from David. How can you implement lean without scaring people with change and Japanese concepts and language? So I think there's a couple questions within the question there. How can we, let me talk first about without scaring people with change. I mean, I think there's a really interesting kind of understanding of people that comes from psychologists and people who look at brain science. It is in our human nature. Our amygdala, exactly. I don't know, Greg, you're the doctor. If I'm pointing out, I forget exactly
where the all that many years ago.
Where the amygdala is, but our quote-unquote reptile brain is the part of our brain that we all have that kicks in the fight or flight reaction when posed with changes, even when the change is positive. And so I think instead of lecturing people to not be afraid of change, that's sort of like saying don't be human. I think the most proven approach is to make change small and to engage people. I did a podcast once with a psychologist, Robert Moore from UCLA, and he's written a couple of books about Kaizen and the brain, is that when you make change small, it doesn't trigger that fight or flight instinct and that reaction. And so when you engage people and they become more comfortable with change over time, there's a really good strategy there for Kaizen and continuous improvement to be that entree into lean. Well, Greg, what are some of your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think we're living in a really exciting time also because we're starting to understand some of the neurobehavioral science that explains a lot of the principles, kind of almost empirically. Lean principles and lean thought process over the last 70 years has come to some conclusions of what works and what doesn't, and now the science is starting to catch up with things like functional MRI. Mark Jabin, not to be confused with Mark Graban, right. J-A-B-N, has just put out, and Mark, you may know the title of the book, but has just put out a really good body of work that kind of starts talking a lot about that and really applying it to continuous improvement. So I think we're kind of living in a really exciting time to understand that. We empirically have known, right? And you'll remember the person that quotes this, people aren't afraid of change, they're afraid of being changed, right? So there was a great, I took a poli-sci class in college, and it was called political discourse. And one of the themes of the class is that people will change in front of you if you accept who they are, right? So it's that concept of going to someone and saying, oh, we're going to change this process, or going to them and asking, hey, how can we change this process together to make this easier for you to do your work? And all of a sudden, that's an engaging conversation to people. And one concept that we didn't touch about is the language, and then I'll kind of shut up for your thoughts, Mark. But I'm a real big fan of not using any Japanese terms. In fact, for a couple years ago, I was almost this close to changing the name of the company KaiNexus because it referenced the word Kaizen. That's how fanatical I am about this. Until this just becomes natural language and kind of demystifying this entire thing. It's almost like when you're talking to a doctor and they're using medical terms about what condition you have, it completely alienates the conversation. So I think the less you can use terminology that isn't a part of our everyday vernacular, the better you're going to do with demystifying this whole process. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we shouldn't let words or terminology become a barrier. The same thing could be said about the word lean. If people hear the word lean, it's not the best word for something that's very positive and engaging. Something, when people hear lean, I've heard people in organizations say, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, oh, we're already lean, we don't have enough staff as it is.
Right.
Like, well, that might be one use of the everyday use of the word lean, not having enough. Scarcity, shortages, that's not what lean manufacturing or lean healthcare was supposed to be. So if the word lean is getting in the way, then I would avoid that word. I try not overdoing it with Japanese words. I do use the word Kaizen. You could say continuous improvement. I think introducing people to the word allows you to have a conversation about the concept of Kaizen and how Kaizen is different than suggestion boxes and in other approaches. That's one benefit. But I say waste instead of muda. There are some Japanese terms that I hear where I have to go run to a glossary or do a Google search. I only know a handful of Japanese terms, and I think there's a risk where sometimes people use the Japanese words to sort of say, well, look, I know more about this than you, which can be, instead of demystifying, it sort of creates some barriers possibly to engaging people and improving.
And that I think is this, I don't want to say it's always manifesting out of insecurity, because it's not always insecurity that people will do that, but it's that we're trying to become more professional and establish authority by being able to use terminology that another person can't. I mean, it's what medicine did in the 1800s, because I mean, a lot of the medicine they were looked at as quacks, and so well, let's create an entire vernacular on this that shows that we're professionals. And so I think if we're going to take this to the common people, we need to use common language, and every time you not use a Japanese word, do that.
Right. So the next time a doctor tells a patient to take that medication PRN, we'd say, well, wait, why not just say as needed, right?
Exactly.
All right, so we've got another question here from Roland. And we'll speculate a little bit of the question behind the question, but this was submitted. When will management realize that the employee on the front line is closest to the issue and the concerns, and usually has the best ideas? So I sense a little frustration in the way the question is worded, maybe perhaps about their organization. I think there's a general approach here. Are we going to help management understand this by telling them? Maybe not. How do we help management discover that people at the front line have ideas?
A big club going in with a big club banging them on the head?
No. So I mean, can we? Greg, what are your thoughts? How would you create an opportunity for someone to come out and discover what their ideas are? I mean, I don't know how you can't tell a leader to be humble. I'm not sure how you create that experience for that to happen.
There was almost a part of me when I read the question that I thought, perhaps, is this kind of a rhetorical, in-jest question, but
they might have very well been talking about their organization, and I'm not going to ask or say where they're from, but
I think
that's a general problem.
Because I think that the folks that are listening in to this discussion, they're CI experts. I don't imagine people that aren't CI experts listening in. And so I mean, this is directed right at CI people, what I'm about to say. And it is absolutely critical for us to be the champions, to be the sitting on the front edge of really selling these concepts to an organization. So every organization is going to be at a different place, so to speak, in their journey. Some of those people are several years along in their journey, and they understand where they're at, they understand where they're going. Along their journey, they're completely lost. Other people don't even know that there is a journey to be made. And so as a CI expert in an organization, you found yourself in an organization that has valued this in some way. It's your job to figure out what's the need of your organization and then meet that need. And that need may be to go to leaders and sell CI, right? And really, if you think about the best kinds of sales people, it's what our sales model is based on here at KaiNexus, is really listening, figuring out the need, and then figuring out what is, you have this really large, vast amount of knowledge, and going in and saying, well, we're going to start on page 1 of the the CI encyclopedia and read it to a leader is the absolute wrong way to go about this, right? You have this whole toolkit, if you will, going, engaging, listening to the problems of your leadership, and then figuring out how to help solve those problems. By the way, when you go through that journey, when they start walking next to you, you will end up teaching them, and they will end up realizing, but it's going to be the Socratic method in many ways. It's not going to be a teacher standing at the front of a class and kind of force-feeding this into leadership. They're going to need to kind of be part of that process, and in order to do that, you're going to need to go in and help solve their problems.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this ties back to the first question a little bit about scaring people. How can we get middle managers or executives trusting the frontline employees when that might be scary to them? That may really go against the grain of what they were taught or what they've been practicing as a leader for decades. So maybe it takes some baby steps, understanding their concerns. How can you expose people to situations that maybe allow them to disprove some of those concerns? But I mean, I think this idea of selling is tough, because if you've got somebody who's not even in the market for what it is you're trying to sell, that becomes really frustrating if you're trying to sell this idea.
And so then it becomes a matter of marketing, right? Because I mean, marketing almost, if you had to put it in a linear way, and it's not linear, but if you had to put it in a linear way, marketing comes before selling. And so kind of being able to market your services, being able to have people understand what value your and your team brings to the organization are going to be critical. But waiting around for something to happen is, I think, a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and then when you think about marketing, you can think of testimonials, right? So I'm working with an organization right now that's hopefully going to become a KaiNexus customer, and they're having these conversations about helping their leaders understand. So when you can show a video of a leader from another organization speaking about their own initial skepticism and how they came to see very tangibly, not theoretically, but for real, that their employees do have great ideas and a lot to contribute. There's sort of that bandwagon effect. So seeing an expert testimonial of somebody who's like them, that goes a long way, and you see that technique used in a lot of different types of advertising.
Great question.
All right, so we have another question here from Tanya, and I'm going to punt on this question because I don't have any kids, but this question came in: are there any tips on lean and Kaizen as applied to parenting?
Well, for punting on this, Mark, but I will tell you, I was never a better parent than when I didn't have children. You know, my wife Adrienne and I would always, we joke now, because when we didn't have children, we saw our friends with, we'll never do that when we're a parent. And then of course, when you actually become a parent, everything changes. But it's a great question. I'm gonna kind of, I was thinking through these questions. I'm gonna take it in two parts. So part number one is from an email that I just got from my good friend Colby Evans, a local dermatologist here in Austin, who is in Japan right now, and he is a Toyota factory tour. And obviously,
Greg, you cut out a little bit. He was on a Toyota factory tour?
Yes, he took his children to Toyota for a factory tour of Toyota, and he obviously he knows about Lean and Kaizen and KaiNexus from his relationship with me, and so he I'm sure sought that out as part of that. But that's a great way, right? Just to simply expose your children in more formal ways to think of it. The second part to this question, I think, is taking kind of that mindset and that social, that science behind humanity, which we talk a lot. There's several books on the subject right now about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the improvement principles are based in a backdrop and an environment. Right? Is the company a stagnant entity that is the same over decades, or is a company an ever-evolving organism that's growing and adapting and becoming better? And so, if you think that's really what growth mindset's all about, right? And so when I'm talking to my daughter Micah, who's now 6, going into the 1st grade, I'm talking about her. She actually has some homework in kindergarten, not still wasn't onerous or anything, but I'm talking to her about doing her homework. I'm talking about her trying to learn how to read. I'm talking about her. They have all these computer programs. They're fascinating math programs and reading programs that are highly engaging to children. That's actually work to help make the brain stronger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you do that a little bit every day, because that's how you build muscles. And there's this whole great video series, and I'm blanking on it because I was up till 4:30 in the morning last night at an ER shift and didn't get much sleep. It's called Mojo. Mojo has a great, if you type in Mojo growth mindset, all these children's videos, and it shows, I think, some of the really core principles of when we're talking about continuous improvement and we're talking about lean principles. If you really keep peeling back the layers and layers and layers, you're really talking about a company having a growth mindset. And I think teaching that to your children from day one about why are they doing homework, why are they going to school, it's not to learn facts, right? That's not. It's to make the brain stronger, because we don't know what problems they're going to be solving in 5 years, in 20 years, certainly not in 50 years. And they don't need a whole bunch of facts in their head. They need a really strong muscle, which is their brain, to help work on those problems. And so,
yeah,
right. I mean, your children are essentially, you have this, lifelong experiment that you're working on that you have no way to run multiple experiments on. So you got to kind of break it up into little parts and figure out what works. And I think that those are some principles I've been instilling in Micah from day one, and hopefully they work.
Yeah, I just looked up, there's an article when you talk about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. This is from The Atlantic in 2015, saying that you shouldn't praise kids for being smart.
Right.
That smart kids then, once they get that label, they become really, as it says here, averse to making mistakes.
Right.
They say, well, I'll make mistakes, then I guess I'm not smart. We learn by making mistakes, and so you can. It's better to label kids as being creative or hardworking or things other than smart.
And whenever she's doing work, it's always and this isn't something that I came up with, and this is stuff I'm reading and realizing, that makes total sense. Micah, I'm really proud of you. You worked really hard on that, and did really good work. And that's a whole different message than, Micah, you are so smart. Yeah. And the Mojo series literally walks through that in a message that a child can understand. Quite frankly, it's great for adults as well.
Yeah, and I think there are parallels, and I'll bring it back to the workplace. If somebody is participating in continuous improvement, to me, continuous improvement is not a function of quote unquote intelligence. If you're going to measure that by IQ or education level, which may or may not be the same thing, but to me, being an expert in your own work is something everybody has. I think everybody has innate creativity. They might not label themselves a creative person, but people have the ability, back to the second question, they have the ability to point out problems, see barriers, and help brainstorm and test solutions, as opposed to that being just an activity for those who are smart.
Great question.
All right, so we have another question here. We could probably talk 30 minutes on that last topic, but we'll move on. One other point I was going to make, again, as a non-parent, I love it when I see people share stories of using Kaizen and continuous improvement or lean principles at home to help get their family off to work and school on time in the morning. They are being creative and solving problems that matter to them, which is probably a good thing to demonstrate and practice in the home. So another question here, we're interested in KaiNexus, but we're still trying to figure out if it's best to start with a physical board for the team and then use KaiNexus for tracking and sharing, or should we do everything in KaiNexus, I'm assuming, to start, or in general, maybe there's two questions there, starting manually and moving into a digital realm, and then the idea of doing everything digitally versus doing some things analog, manually, physically with a local team and using electronic means for broad sharing. Do you want to touch on that first, Greg?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, to me, the answer is yes. Because there isn't a single answer that's going to answer this question, right? And so we have literally seen there's a saying in medicine, and as I'm sure everyone realizes here, I'm an ER doctor, and I love bringing medical knowledge into the process improvement world, and I love bringing the process improvement knowledge into the medical world, right? It's the foundation of KaiNexus. But there's a saying in medicine that says, 100 different presentations for appendicitis will present 100 different ways. And so there are patterns that we see at organizations, but there are different work environments, physically, electronically. There are different skill sets. There are levels of access to simply a computer or a smartphone. And so the way I would answer this is you certainly shouldn't. It says, I mean, we talk to people, technology there's no role for technology, right? Oh, you have to do this on paper first. Well, that's not right. I mean, and then also taking the other situation, like, oh no, you should definitely scrap all the paper and all the bulletin boards and go 100% time. Well, that's not right either. So I think you need to figure out what's the problem you're trying to solve. What are the main barriers? How can we make it easier for the organization to do that? What I think you'll end up finding is that there's probably going to be a slight variation difference to all of this. And I think that some places are going to do really well by using KaiNexus more as a tracking mechanism. Other places are going to do really well by using KaiNexus as an engagement mechanism and to actually get the work done. And I think the most important thing is if you're thinking of technology as an accelerator, then I think you're thinking of it as the right way. If you're thinking of technology as it's actually going to be the magic silver bullet, then I think you're setting yourself up for failure. I don't know, Mark, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, the way, I would answer that question, it's classic lean answer or Six Sigma answer to say, well, it depends. It depends on the scenario. If people are going to more readily take to their iPhone and a web browser as a way of engaging with the organization and with each other, then that's great. If people are a little skeptical of technology and you think paper and cards on a board is the way to start, then I would say it's better to start with something than not start at all. But then to the question of what problem are you trying to solve, I've seen organizations that say bulletin boards might work fine within a local team, but we've got multiple sites across the state, across the country, around the world. One of the problems our customers are trying to solve is visibility that can't take place when you're separated by distance, separated by time. So I think there's no better solution for spreading and sharing improvement. There's no better solution for remote collaboration across different sites. So there certainly are certain problems that are solved through technology, and KaiNexus is happy to work with people on that. So let's squeeze in a couple of more questions.
Okay.
Here's another question. Is it necessary to make improvement mandatory, to set a goal for how many projects people should be involved in? It seems like people won't participate unless we make it mandatory. So all these questions today actually I think have a couple of questions within the question. For one, I think I wouldn't call these projects. If we're trying to get people involved in improvement, calling something a project is going to sound like a big change that may trigger the amygdala, and people might say, I don't have any big ideas, I don't have time to participate in a big project. So I would use a term like improvements. How many improvements should people be involved in? So I've worked with and studied a lot of organizations that have set goals or haven't set goals. They've had aspirational goals. We'd like you to do 2 improvements every year. Some organizations will set kind of a quota or a target saying you must do X in a year. And sometimes targets and goals and incentives can get dysfunctional. To me, the real spirit of continuous improvement is self-motivated. It's something that we want to do because it makes our work easier, because it helps our patients or our customers. It helps the long-term good of the organization. So to me, the thing that drives improvement activity is the variable of leadership, activity, behaviors, level of effort. This is not about being smart with improvement, it's about working hard at improvement and continuing to do that. So I've seen organizations without goals, targets, incentives do extremely well with continuous improvement, and it comes down to, again, that variable of leadership. How do we engage people?
And I think Daniel Pink's book Drive really breaks down the behavioral science here really well. Mm-hmm. I would argue that CI experts should probably be in their professional reading, 50% of what they read should not be about lean. 50% of what they read should be about behavioral science. This is 100% about humans and how to motivate humans and how humans work together. And so if you haven't read it, you should literally, as soon as you're done with this webinar, go pick it up physically or electronically and start reading it. You will understand more about yourself. You'll understand more about your interpersonal relations. You'll understand more about your colleagues at work, and I think it speaks a lot to this specific topic. There are certain places and times when quotas are the right way to motivate people. Continuous improvement is not one of those places, and because of, and you hit it on it, Mark, because of the dysfunction that it brings. If you say you have to do an improvement a year, 2 improvements a year, 1 a month, then all of a sudden you're creating an environment that's going to reward junk, and it's going to reward the wrong thing. So we work with a number of organizations that have done both, and we work with a number of organizations that have flip-flopped between them as well, and it's been really interesting to see the result. But one organization we're working with that initially had a quota of 1 or 2 improvements per month, so they had this just volume of improvement, and that was go. They said, okay, we're not going to do a quota anymore. We're going to kind of move more to the Daniel Pink incentive, internal. What's the word I'm looking for? Internal motivation. Thank you. Internal motivation and intrinsic motivation.
Intrinsic, right.
They realized, wow, we have a lot fewer ideas, but the quality of those ideas are actually creating much bigger impact in the organization. So I would definitely challenge you, if you're thinking of going down the quota route, then really think of it more as rewarding accomplishment. You know, use a badge system, recognize people, give small tokens of a Starbucks gift card. You talk about a lot, Mark, as a great. Not that we're promoting Starbucks. It can be insert name of. And I think what you're going to end up realizing is it's going to feel better, and it's going to ultimately drive greater and better impact for the organization, which is what this is all about.
Yeah, that's well said. And one other point I'll make is that goal, that target, sometimes becomes a limit. We want you to do 4 per year. And people do their 4, and they say, well, I've got another 6 ideas, but I better hold them in my back pocket because I don't know if I can come up with 4 ideas next year. They might ask for 6 next year. So sometimes that leads to people holding back, which is not the intent.
Great point.
So we might run a minute long, but Greg, here's a more KaiNexus specific question from Julia. For a large organization, how does the system work to give access to each employee, and is it possible to link KaiNexus with other systems? I'll let you address that.
So the first question, I'll tongue-in-cheek answer, it works really, really well. No, in earnest, I think that you can divide the kind of work your organization is going to need to do to develop a culture of continuous improvement in a couple buckets, okay? Bucket number 1, daily continuous improvement that's coming from Frontline. I refer to it as bottom-up improvement, right? Bucket number 2, top-down, what people refer to as project-based, larger change, multidisciplinary, whether that takes the form of lean projects, Kaizen events, value stream maps. You now have alignment work that needs to kind of make sure that your top-down and your bottom-up work are working synergistically together. You're moving in the same direction. You're going to need your data. And then finally, we find it really, really important to be coaching / training your staff with problem-solving skills. So whether you're tracking your certifications or whether you're tracking your classes in KaiNexus as well. So depending on what problem you're trying to solve, and every organization might be working at a different part of that equation, will determine whether or not you need to give all or some of your employees access. If you're trying to do frontline daily improvement, which to me is the holy grail of developing a culture of continuous improvement, then it is best to give everyone access to KaiNexus. There's no reason to ask someone to go play football, but say, well, you can only look at the football. You can't actually touch the football.
Right.
And if you're really focusing on training classes, well, then the people that you're training to do A3s or whatnot, give those people access to KaiNexus, because giving people access to KaiNexus without the right resources behind it, without an understanding of what are we trying to do in the system, is also another route for failure. So we have organizations that are doing all of those, and we're happy to kind of help figure out what problem is your organization trying to solve, where are you trying to get to, where are you at in your journey, and then figuring out kind of the right level of access and who needs to be on the system and who doesn't need to be on the system.
Yeah. And Julie, if you'd like to follow up, we encourage you to reach out to KaiNexus, or you can contact Greg at KaiNexus.com. Greg would be happy, I'm sure, to talk with you more, or refer you to somebody on our growing team at KaiNexus. So that's been great, great to see. I've been involved with KaiNexus now for 6 years. It was about 6 years and 2 weeks ago that I became part of the KaiNexus team. So it's really been great to see the progress, and more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. We excitingly just added 2 new people to the team. It's really exciting, and it's going to be a lot of fun to get all of our team together, engaging with our customers at our user conference. So I will put a plug in for that. It's a great time if you're a KaiNexus customer. We do sometimes have some prospective customers there too, but the vast majority of people that are there are KaiNexus customers. They're sharing their knowledge, they're sharing how they're using KaiNexus, they're figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and it's like complete energy for us at the team to get to see everybody. So, I'm sorry?
It's very invigorating to be around our customers, and so you can learn more about that. Just do a Google search for KaiNexus User Conference. Would be a great way to learn about that. So we are out of time. We are going to do episode 14 probably in a month or two. We'll send out info about that. We will start off next time. We had a question from Mech about how to bring back an engaged atmosphere once you've made progress, but then that culture is maybe sort of faded or trailed off a bit. So that'll be a great question to start with next time. I will encourage you, please go ahead and submit more questions for future episodes, and we look forward to doing more of these. So on behalf of Greg Jacobson and the team here at KaiNexus, I'm Mark Raven. Thanks for joining us. Greg, do you have any final thought to end with here?
There's no better day than today to spread continuous improvement, so best of luck, everyone.